Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a journey that's, well, anything but conventional. The story of Joe Rogan.
Right.
Many of you know him, maybe as the UFC commentator, the stand-up comedian, perhaps the host of that huge podcast.
One of the biggest, yeah.
But if you peel back those layers, you find this narrative built on, sheer self-reliance, consistent effort, and this real knack for embracing discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission here with this deep dive is to pull out those powerful nuggets of insight from his, well, incredibly diverse experiences.
Yeah.
We're going to look at how these seemingly separate paths, martial arts, comedy, TV, podcasting, how they all kind of converge, and offer some surprising lessons for you.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how those early challenges sort of forged his drive.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up with an abusive father, moving around a lot. It seems like it gave him this profound desire for control over his own life.
Right, control and building himself up.
Yeah, exactly. Building himself from the ground up, almost like seeking ways to master himself and, his environment.
And that intensity, it found an outlet pretty quickly, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
He found solace, discipline, incredible discipline, actually, in martial arts.
He really threw himself into it.
Yeah, he wasn't just dabbling. He became the Massachusetts full-contact Taekwondo champ 4 years running.
4 years, wow.
Even won the U.S. Open Taekwondo Championship as lightweight. But then, injuries, recurring headaches from all that intense training, it unfortunately cut that path short.
Yeah, a really abrupt end to what looked like a pretty promising fighting career. And that became a huge pivot point for him.
Had to channel that energy somewhere else.
Absolutely. That immense discipline, that drive.
Yeah.
It had to go somewhere new. And that led him to, the grueling world of stand-up comedy. Boston, late 1980s.
And not an easy start either.
No way. He worked odd jobs, teaching martial arts, driving a limo, you name it all, while honing his style. That edgier, often blue style.
Right, the explicit stuff. And he's been really open about how brutal those early days were. He compared Hollywood auditions to begging for a bowl of soup.
Imagine that.
Sounds incredibly humbling, especially after the success he'd found in Taekwondo. How do you think that constant rejection maybe shaped his later tenacity?
Oh, I think it absolutely fortified it. The persistence, it eventually paid off. He landed mainstream roles like in news radio and then famously Fear Factor.
Right, Fear Factor. Huge show.
Huge. But that passion for combat sports, it never really dimmed, which pulled him back to the UFC, first as a backstage interviewer in 97, then transitioning to color commentator in 2002. And he's been just a central voice for the sport for, over 2 decades now?
Incredible longevity there. And then 2009, he really changed the media game, didn't he?
Oh, completely.
The Joe Rogan Experience. It started with him and his producer, Brian Redban. And Rogan himself admits just bullshitting in front of cameras while they figured out the tech.
Yeah, super rough at the start.
So how did that raw, unscripted, long-form approach, combined with just showing up consistently, how did that become such a cultural phenomenon? It seems so counterintuitive to, traditional media.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? That initial, let's call it roughness, it actually became its superpower.
Interesting.
He didn't wait for perfection. He didn't wait for the perfect studio or setup. He just started. And that raw authenticity, that plus his just insatiable curiosity, his genuine desire to just talk to interesting people, keep learning, that created something totally unique. He just kept showing up, kept talking, kept evolving.
So, okay, wrapping this up a bit, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Rogan's story, it's a powerful reminder, I think, that you don't need some linear path, no predefined blueprint for success.
Not at all.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights several crucial takeaways, things that aren't just, generic advice.
Definitely. First, think about passion fueling persistence. It wasn't just casual interest that got him through those brutal Taekwondo camps or you said, soul-crushing rejections in early comedy.
Yeah.
It was this almost obsessive drive to master his craft, to keep pushing, even when it felt impossible. That's the kind of passion that sustains you through the really lean times when most people would just quit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Second, consistency really does trump perfection. He didn't wait for the ideal setup for his podcast. He just started with what he had, literally bullshitting in front of cameras, like you said, and then refined it over thousands of episodes. That consistent action, even imperfect action, built a media empire.
And third, embracing discomfort. That was absolutely key to his growth.
Yeah.
Whether it was, taking punches in sparring or bombing hard at a comedy club or even putting out those unpolished early podcast episodes for anyone to hear, he consistently stepped into the uncomfortable. And that's where the real growth happens, right?
Definitely seems like it. And finally, maybe his greatest superpower, curiosity.
Yeah, arguably.
That insatiable desire to learn, to talk to experts from literally every field imaginable, just to understand the world around him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the absolute engine driving his success that keeps his content fresh. Which kind of brings us to a final question for you. Considering Rogan's journey, adapting, exploring, just doing what new frontiers are you ready to maybe dive into? Even if the path isn't clear, even if it feels kind of rough at the start,